How's it going, everyone? How are you doing? Today we are going over my match week 6 predictions for the Premier League. Last week was not as surprising as the week prior, but still some decent results nonetheless. Quite a few draws. We saw 5 draws last week, and that was more than the rest of the season combined. I think in the first 4 weeks it was only 3 draws. Last week there were 5, so it was pretty tight week and a lot more draws than I was expecting. But some results didn't quite go the way of certain teams that teams probably deserved, and there was a couple comebacks and teams did perform quite well. There were a couple interesting games, mostly between the bottom 4. Those 4 games weren't as boring as I thought they were going to be, but they also weren't the most exciting. But to get right into it, we're going to go over Aston Villa versus Leeds. I feel like Aston Villa are going to be too much. They've been performing quite well recently. Jack Grealish has been playing out of his mind. He's definitely going to be a player to watch this week. He's been playing out of his mind and well beyond any expectations, much like Aston Villa as a whole. And I think that Aston Villa take this game. They shut down Leeds for back-to-back weeks. I believe it'll be 2-0 to Aston Villa. I feel like they'll just continue their trend and keep it rolling. It's going to be a question for Aston Villa how long they can keep up this trend and keep up this winning streak, and how, this high that they're on, how long can they keep that up. And I think they'll continue it against Leeds, but that's going to be the big question for Aston Villa going into these next weeks. Now, West Ham versus Manchester City. I think West Ham will give City a challenge. However, City, I feel like Pep's starting to figure out tactics, how to outsmart the other opponent again. I feel like that was always Pep's thing, is outsmarting the opponent, out-tacticking the other opponent. He did it against Arteta. They both tried completely different things, and Pep's worked out better than Arteta. So I do think that Pep's figuring it out and will come up with the result against West Ham. I think they bounce back to some kind of form in this game, although I wouldn't be surprised if West Ham pull off some crazy feat and pull out this huge result. West Ham showed a lot of heart to not give up in that Spurs game, but despite being 3-0 down for pretty much at least what was the third goal for Spurs was like in the 25th minute. So from then on, they stayed in the game. They kept their head down, kept doing what they had to do, and stayed in it. They kept their heart in it and came up with the draw, a 3-0 draw. But I think they'll give a challenge. I do think they'll give a challenge to Manchester City, but City will just finally, get some kind of positive result going their way. Now, Fulham versus Crystal Palace. I think Crystal Palace performed poorly against Brighton, if I'm perfectly honest. They didn't do quite well, and they just looked flat. They only had 1 shot on goal and were absolutely dominated in terms of possession. So I think that Crystal Palace, the last 2 games, they haven't performed well purely because of the fact I think that they're just sitting back too much and they're not taking it to the other opponent. I know their style of play is to sit back and wait for their chances, but it's not. These last couple weeks it hasn't worked against Chelsea, against Brighton. They managed to get a point against Brighton, but I personally think that was a bit lucky for them. Brighton had all the chances in the game and they just didn't take them. So I think that ultimately Fulham will have the edge in this game, but I don't think either team quite finds the result that they're looking for, the 3 points. So I think it's going to end up a draw between them two. Now, Manchester United, Chelsea, I'm going to cover this obviously a bit more the day before the game. Not a bit, a lot more, but the day before the game. But I do think this is going to be a tight game. If you really think about it, Chelsea and United are kind of in similar boats. Rickety defenses, pretty good midfield, and then an explosive front. Let's just say that. I was gonna say volatile, where sometimes they score, sometimes they don't, but when they score, they score. When they don't, they don't. So it's either no goals or 5 goals, and they're both in a similar boat. They have 2 coaches that are rookies in a sense, and they are both almost at a point of walking on eggshells. And I just feel like this will be a big result for either of them, whoever can come up with a win. It's going to be a tight game. For me, I'm personally going to go with a 2-2 draw. I feel like that's going to be fair to both sides. It's going to be a tight game. If one team dominates the other, it's like a 3-0 dominant win for either United or Chelsea. I feel like the opposite manager, either Ole or Lampard, will be in trouble, and we'll start getting to that point where they're, walking on eggshells and need to start putting together some good results. United did pull off a good result against PSG, but I still think Chelsea have a chance to do some damage in this game. Now, Liverpool versus Sheffield. I feel like Liverpool should have this in the bag. It's going to be a matter of how they respond to injuries. We get to see, actually, I think they're playing today. Oh, wow. I'm looking at, sorry, I'm looking at Champions League score. I don't mean to have my phone out while recording, but Shakhtar's beating Real Madrid 3-2. Oh my God. It's the 94th minute. There's no way they just pulled that off. There's no, okay. Anyway, that's not the video. Literally, I was checking to see if Liverpool are playing today. They are playing against Ajax today. That's how you know when I'm recording this. But they are playing Ajax today in about 15 minutes or so or whatever. They're playing Ajax, so we'll get to see our first look at how Liverpool respond to their injuries and whether they can, keep going without Virgil van Dijk and Alisson. For me personally, I think Liverpool can. I feel like their midfield is the strongest part of their team, is the glue in their team. So I don't think these defensive injuries will hit them as much, but they will hurt. So it'll be interesting to see today how they respond and how they respond against Sheffield. But I feel like no matter, Liverpool should have the edge over Sheffield. I'm going to give them a 2-0 win. I feel like Sheffield just won't have enough for Liverpool. I think Ryan Brewster might give Liverpool, their former guy Ryan Brewster, might give Liverpool a bit of a run for their money. Maybe he'll challenge them a bit. Now, Southampton versus Everton. I feel like this is going to be a big win for Everton. I think Everton should win this. They should. I'm going to give them a big 4-0 win. Southampton did perform well against Chelsea, don't get me wrong. And they are very good at set pieces, so I could see them stealing a couple of goals against Everton. But I feel like Everton are just still on a roll. They did well against Liverpool. I mean, controversies, put aside, I feel like they did do well. They've been performing well. They're still on a streak of at least 2 goals a game. So I don't know if Southampton can keep pace with Everton. I feel like Everton will just be too much for Southampton and do what Chelsea couldn't, and come up with a big win. Now, Wolves versus Newcastle. Newcastle got blown back by Manchester United in the final stages of the game, and honestly, for a good portion of the game, they weren't quite in it. So I think that ultimately, I don't know if either team's really gonna find the win in this game, and I'm tempted to give it a draw. I think Wolves didn't do quite well against Leeds. They were dominated in terms of possession. They were outshot, I believe. I think Leeds did have more shots in that game, and maybe Leeds did deserve more than lost. They deserved at least a point, but I don't know if either team will find a result in this game, and I'm tempted to give it a draw, but I don't want to count either team out, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a 2-2 draw. I don't know if... It's a tough one because I could see it going either way. I could see Wolves winning, I could see Newcastle winning. So I'm just going to go in the middle and give it a draw, but I'm not going to be surprised, if either team wins. It's a very tight one in terms of predicting that game. Now, Arsenal versus Leicester. Arsenal, obviously, coming off of the loss against Manchester City, wasn't the worst loss in the world. They didn't completely get dominated or anything like that, but a loss is a loss. That's something, you got to rebound from. Leicester, a similar boat. They went back and forth with Aston Villa. That was a tight game between them two. Honestly, it was a pretty exciting game to watch. It was very back and forth, and I just feel like both teams just weren't clinical enough until the final minute when Aston Villa scored. But I feel like both teams were just missing that final pass. They were just missing that bad shot. They were just right there. Both of them were back and forth. They were shifting momentum in the game a lot. Control of the game was shifting back and forth between both teams, and it was a pretty exciting game to watch. So ultimately, I think either team could have won that game between Villa and Leicester, and it would have been a deserved result. But I'm not going to say Aston Villa didn't deserve the win. I'm just saying that whoever won the game honestly would have deserved the win. So with that being said, Leicester are going to come into this game against Arsenal looking to rebound. Much like Arsenal, they both had 1-0 losses, and I just think that Arsenal is going to win this game. I feel like they're going to be stronger than Leicester in terms of attack in particular, in my opinion. And I feel like Leicester will struggle against Arsenal. But I think it'll be a closer game. I think it'll be a close game. 1-0 Arsenal. I think Arsenal will take that one. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a draw, but I don't see Leicester winning that game. I think Arsenal will have that one in the bag. Now, Brighton versus West Brom. This is a game where I feel like Brighton have a chance to explode. They're going against a West Brom side that still honestly hasn't shown too much. I feel like the only game that they've really shown a lot was against Chelsea, unfortunately. The high press looks impressive when they get it down and they're able to take it to the other team, but honestly they really haven't shown too many flashes of that. So I feel like this is Brighton's chance to explode and have a big game, and I'm gonna give them a big win because I feel like Brighton are getting string of results where they don't quite deserve to lose or take only a point from the game. In particular, in my opinion, the Crystal Palace game, I feel like Brighton deserved a lot more than simply a draw, but they just weren't clinical enough. They had all of the possession, like all of the shots in that game, and I feel like they'll bounce back and keep the train going and come up with a big result against West Brom, taking them down and come up with a big win, which should be huge for their confidence and their momentum. Now, Burnley versus Spurs. Spurs obviously gave up the big lead towards the end of the final 10 minutes, but I don't think Burnley quite has the quality of West Ham, and I feel like this is going to be another big win for Spurs. I'm going to give them the biggest win of the week. I'm going to give them a 4-0 win. I feel like they get off to another early start. Heung-min Son gets a brace in the first half. Harry Kane puts on the third or fourth in the second half, or late in the first or whatever. And Spurs just coast and they hold this lead. They don't lose it. Burnley may score a goal. I just feel like Burnley are another team that hasn't shown too much in terms of how they're going to compete against other teams in the league. And I feel like Spurs just will be too much for Burnley and come up with the biggest win of the week, in my humble opinion, of course. Those were my predictions for match week 6. Not as tough as last week. However, these games are going to be tighter, in my opinion. Teams are starting to show up. Teams are starting to ball out. Not the usual big 6, not the usual ones we've been seeing in these last couple seasons. And I feel like we're going to see maybe a couple upsets this week. I didn't really put any upsets, but I think that this week's going to be an entertaining one to watch. I feel like most of the games are going to be entertaining to watch. Obviously, United-Chelsea is probably the headliner purely off of name. But I feel like Aston Villa-Leeds is a game you got to keep an eye on. West Ham City is a game you got to keep an eye on. And Arsenal-Leicester, I feel like, is another game you got to keep an eye on. Maybe watch Liverpool to see how they respond to injuries, to see if that's going to affect them in their bid to try and retain the Premier League title. And also Everton, whether they can, how they respond to the controversy surrounding Jordan Pickford and all that, whether it'll affect them mentally or if they'll just bounce back and keep the train rolling that they were on. But yeah, those are my predictions for week 6. As I already said, if you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. Go check out my socials down in the description. My Twitter is @BlueHermit1. My Instagram is @BlueHermit_. Please share the socials with all your friends, family, everybody you know. Let the people know Blue Hermit's where it's at. And I'll see you guys later. Bye!